Hi, welcome back to Techarati. It's my great pleasure to interview Dr. Jacqui Taylor today, who is named one of the most influential women in UK tech by Computer Weekly, and she's also the CEO of Flying Binary. Jacqui, welcome.
Hi there, really good to speak to you today.
It's fascinating what you're involved with, the sheer scope of it. How does one become one of the most 15 influential women in UK tech? What's that journey?
So I think that the journey is a long one, but in terms of coalescing what I'm doing, that's as a direct result of our mission at Flying Binary. Our mission is inclusion, leave no one behind. What has happened in the world, and particularly the work I've done since effectively there was a reset I pressed in 2018, is to look at where technology has become the outcome and where it's become the enabler. And I would say that the origins of that piece, which was Computer Weekly awarded me on the basis of the empathy economy, and that challenge of technology no longer being the outcome, but the enabler. What does it actually enable, and what outcomes can we create? Some of the world's biggest challenges, technology has a huge place to play, but not for itself. And I think that's that piece. But for me, of course, this is my world, the industrial Internet of Things. As we move from a digital focus to a connected world, I'm actually an engineer, an aerospace engineer, in my very beginnings of my career. And so I started with, hardware, with putting planes in skies, all of that. I added software. I was one of the initial teams in aerospace engineering that created the discipline of software engineering. So I went from a whole sort of value chain of technology, of which software was a small component, to actually articulating how software engineering and the adding of the engineering became a new discipline in our aircraft industry. And of course now full circle, because the rest of the world is getting to that engineering focus, not dominated by software. So as we look forward to what that means for our careers and our industry in IT and in computer science generally, there's less of a focus on software and more of a focus on infrastructure, hardware, all the other things. So we're rebalancing our technology industry as a result. And for me, it's like coming home. It's where I started. I've gone full circle.
That's amazing. It seems like if you're going to have a real deep impact on the world and in technology, you need a kind of holistic approach and perhaps a multidisciplinary approach, and to wear several hats at the same time. And thinking about that and future leaders, having diversity within that field seems very important. What do you think? Do you think there are unheard voices at the moment within the field, within leadership or within the workforce?
Yes, and I think as a result of this pandemic, we have to, take a moment and say our world has changed forever. I don't believe I've termed this meantime of where we were pre-pandemic to when we get to whatever our new normal becomes, the isolation economy, because it's fundamentally changed the way we view our world. And technology has been a leading enabler, again, talking about enablement again, leading enablement for that response to the pandemic. And I think that our industry has come under scrutiny and is an interest beyond our industry now, whereas we were all very much, doing what we did, but largely unknown. And now the whole world understands what we do and effectively what we can enable. So I think that it's the holistic piece is very interesting, but I want to be really clear that it's not an interdisciplinary approach with what I do. It's transdisciplinary. Now, for lots of you listening to this, you're like, what does that mean? That means the career that you have now, you can't just collaborate with folks that are not in your field. Your field actually disappeared. Now, I've had time to adjust to this because I came out of a meeting at the Royal Society back in 2009 when Sir Tim Berners-Lee invented the web science that we've pioneered. And so he said you walk out of here not as an aerospace engineer, your discipline's gone. And that was hard, but actually I've understood that you know, my early careers as an aerospace engineer, what I was doing in understanding and articulating software engineering at that time was looking at holistically the impact of our industry, specifically the design of jet engine technology to reduce noise pollution in our cities. So a societal focus for our careers is actually what beckons us. But that's not even, it's not interdisciplinary, it's not even multidisciplinary, it's transdisciplinary. It's effectively making us all look at our careers from a point of view of a societal impact of what we do.
Yes, it seems that technology really makes us think of ourselves as part of a global community. And of course, there's this emerging role within that global community, which is that of the sort of the science diplomat, the tech diplomat, slightly differently defined roles. But I know that you have worked with UN and you've worked with G20, and I believe you're currently working on G7, is that correct?
Yes, that's right, yes. Although my science diplomat role, I'm not a technology diplomat, I'm a science diplomat, is actually around supporting, let me say, how's the best to describe it, is around supporting other nations around the world to build capability in the area in the UK that we've, you know, I've taken that journey as part of my of the founding of Flying Binary back in 2009, and I'm one of the science diplomats that does the outreach and works directly with the governments around the world who want to take our journey. So you know, they want to embark on their journey, which is a fascinating thing to be involved in, because I often say to any of the governments who are looking to move technology forward in their national agenda to achieve better outcomes for their citizens, that actually I learn as much about what happens when somebody else picks up our work as they learn. Because one thing I want to be really clear about as a science diplomat, it's not a homogenous thing. The UK doesn't give anything. The UK shares what we do, like a knowledge sharing piece. And then we have a dialogue about where that's meaningful, where that might be impactful, how that might support building of capability. And it really locks the sort of future relationship. So obviously our Commonwealth family is a common area that we do that. But for example, I've been working with 8 countries in Latin America, and that's not relationships we've had in that way, but it's been fascinating to work with them all and to see how we can immediately help to sort of pass over that knowledge, work directly with them, and then they can repurpose it pretty much immediately.
Wow, that's very impressive. And I wonder if you have any specific examples that you're willing to share of how something's been triggered capability-wise from the UK and then has been taken on board by other countries.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's lots of them. The one that I've just been speaking about, the Latin American countries, very interestingly, I worked with them as a cohort to actually look at some of the unheard voices, which I know we'll probably come on to. But they have a cohort of 1,600 young people across the 8 Latin American countries, and they were mobilizing the future sort of policy look and how they might progress and what does their roadmap look like. And I had the opportunity to bring a large part of that cohort over to the UK, and we worked for an entire week to do workshopping, to do training, to do ideas, to do exchange. I judged a competition. We started out, I think, 10 companies with our assistance. And from that, very interestingly, some of my UN work has been able to be repurposed, because we're looking at the food value chain, and we have a connection between the UK and some of the Latin American countries where we import export. But it's allowed one of the countries, Chile, to be able to develop policy to enable their own food supply chain. And we've been able to share that sustainable work that I've done in the UN to say, well, from a Chile point of view, how would that work? And the other 7 Latin American countries have been able to repurpose that for theirs. So there's, you know, policy developed in Chile that originally came from those initial discussions where we took a week out of everybody's diaries and had the deep dives of how we do that. And that project was not even the winning project of the 10, I think it was, companies that were formed in that week. I think it was the second one. But that inspired those governments to say, well, that meets some of our sort of future policy objectives. Let's develop that. So I work with young people across the 8 Latin American nations, and Chile as the lead in this one, in order to be able to say, well, what can we help with, what can we do? And then I've brought that work back into the UK government, where we've been looking at our net zero agenda, to say, well, this is what we've learned from Chile. And in fact, all the young diplomats that I'm working with presented to several areas of Majesty's government as to their thinking and that knowledge sharing. And we then repurpose that, what the Latin American countries have learned, and we've got unfolding policy developments from a net zero point of view in the UK directly as a result of those conversations and that work.
That really does sound like a positive example of how we're working as a global community to evolve and develop. Now, I know you've recently been reappointed to the Cabinet Office, is that correct?
Yes, that's right, yes.
What does it feel like working at that level with government?
I find it fascinating because as a science diplomat, you have specific interventions you're doing, requests from other national governments to collaborate and to prepare interventions to support their capability building. There's nothing better, in my view, to coming home and doing that here. And I left the UK Cabinet Office in 2015 to go and do my work internationally. But I'm so glad to be back. And I think that it's very interesting being the part of the development of the change that the UK is navigating. Obviously, the initial piece of that was Brexit. The second piece of that was pandemic. And then our commitments at COP26 and the net zero agenda. So you get to see within, within the policy development, how you move agendas, how you respond to emerging situations. So for example, in the UN, as a result of that work that I've been doing in the UK, we were asked to immediately put some emergency procedures together to support some of the pandemic responses for those countries that were struggling to know how at a government level you can respond. And it's a complex machine, the machinery of government, a very complex machine. And I don't think that any of us have worked harder than in this pandemic on the back of a Brexit, on the back of Brexit, because everything's needed to change and the responses have needed to be instant almost always. And I know that we haven't got everything right, but when I have the conversations I'm due to later today, have the conversation with my expert advisor to the European Commission across Europe, and I have the context to say how well we've actually done. And I think that that's a context that's often missing for the news of the day and the latest, the latest thing that, that journalists and other people comment on, other commentators comment on. But it's been nothing short of miracles that's been achieved in the last couple of years. So I didn't have any qualms about taking that parliamentary appointment back in the Cabinet Office, because to bring some of my international work home is a huge pleasure. I never would underestimate the effort and the diplomacy that's required, and the ingenuity and innovative approaches we need to develop to do that, though, because you have to have a very sound basis for any sort of change, even in a pandemic. And the reality of it is cutting that forward plan when you're the first people in the world to do it. Yes, I've done it before. I've done it several times. It never gets easier when you're setting entirely new agendas that the world has never seen. And we will, maybe next year, I'll be able to give you a highlight in terms of some of the things that we've been doing. But we have created an entire new technology industry, for example, as part of these responses. But more on that another time.
Yes, Jackie, you're very forward thinking, and I know your talk at the conference is about something called the empathy economy, which sounds revolutionary. I was wondering if you could speak a little on that, on your thesis for that.
Yes, so this was in response to this global change I've just spoken about, really, in that Fly Binary is one of the 250 companies that founded the digital economy in the UK. Yes, we're one of those companies from Tech City, the only virtual city on earth that doesn't exist, and all the jokes around Silicon Roundabout and all of that. But when we were all together doing that work in 2009, we were very, very clear that the financial crash that was happening across the world, technology was a response to that. We were very clear about that. And in December 2016, as all of us picked ourselves up and faced the next challenge, which was Brexit, 220 of those entrepreneurs are still in the UK. We all meet on a regular basis still. And we were discussing this. And my intervention at that particular meeting in December was, we're not prepared. We negotiated how to be prepared in 2009. We need to do it again. Be careful what you say, because they're like, but the industrial internet of things, Jackie, that's your job. So essentially I set out to say, what does that mean? You know, we had an economy we created in the UK based on a set of business models. They're no longer valid, but what replaces them? And essentially what happened there was I made a speech at Davos, and I've been unfolding those changes ever since. But suffice it to say, the empathy economy is a replacement for the sharing economy that we were building, that no longer serves us.
This is all very fantastic information, and you've made some of the sort of decision processes that happen perhaps in more kind of closed door meetings more transparent as well, which is so valuable. Just very quickly, how do you think data journalism has fared during the pandemic? Has it done well as an industry?
Well, as the co-founder, I think, given there was 2 of us in the beginning, there's over 7 million of us today. Many of our cohort have lost their lives, some just very recently. Obviously that motivates us all to do what we do every single day. We do it in their name. Facts are sacred as far as we're concerned. It's been faster moving than anything we knew. I mean, everybody will know about Panama Papers, Paradise Papers, Pandora Papers, the opiate scandal, everything that's gone on around, well, everything to do with the pandemic. What we've done, I think, is seen a polarization of the industry, where the misinformation across the social channels, where at one time that was great input for us as an industry, has been degraded and needs to be disregarded, or at least balanced with investigative journalism. And I've seen a polarization across the industry. I have a cohort of PhDs that are you know, moving into our industry, and we've been discussing this about the data journalism has separated itself out into like media reporting and true investigative journalism. So our PhDs are now learning new techniques and new approaches to that. And for me, it's not exactly a reset, because I don't think we're going to change anything about what we do. The motivation is still the same. For Flying Binary, we have an audience of 34 million people across the world that we work with, and they still want to know the stories that are emerging that they don't get access to, but they want it backed by science, they want it backed by evidence. And if anything, the citizens that consume our stories are more interested than ever. But it does require us to develop more of that investigative journalism. And then talking about business models that need to change, data journalism was founded in the sharing economy. What does its business model look like now? It's not unpaid anymore. So there's a whole new debate around how do you pay for the sorts of journalism we need, given we're in this more connected world. And that's something that we're working out as an industry, and we're working out in plain sight of all of you that are consuming it as well.
That's really exciting to think about in terms of how we're growing in different ways, both in how we're applying data as sort of engineers and scientists, and how we're reporting on it and sharing it on platforms. And it seems like those things are going to become even more intertwined, and that there may be some very strong new directives about how to do that. Jacqui, thank you so much for being with Techorati today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure to talk to you too as well.
I'll see you soon.